staff, press, and our Electrify New York partners. Thank you for joining us today as we call on Governor Hochul to include the Green Transit Green Jobs Bill in the 2024-25 executive budget. My name is Jay Mehta, and I'm the Northeast Director for Jobs to America, or JMA. JMA is a nonprofit strategic policy organization. We work very closely with our union and environmental justice partners to ensure that the transition into clean and green technology is a just one, and one that centers workers and their communities. Last week, on behalf of our union and Electrify New York partners in this effort, UAW Region 9A, CWA District 1, IUE CWA, IBW, SMART, and SIU NYC Local 246, JMA sent a letter to Governor Hochul thanking her for a commitment to addressing climate change solutions and encouraging her to adopt the Green Transit and Green Jobs Bill into the upcoming 2024-25 executive budget. And for all those interested, you can read the full letter in the chat. Thank you again for being here today as we embark on Labor Day weekend. If you have any questions for our speakers, please use the Q&A option on Zoom. If you are a member of the press, please put your outlet affiliation into your title. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions directly after we conclude the speaker's portion. First, I'd like to welcome Assemblymember Jeffrey Dinowitz, the primary assembly sponsor for the bill. Assemblymember.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm proud to be here today with this great coalition of people, environmentalists, labor, and that's what it's going to take to get this done. We have in the Assembly around 70 co-sponsors of this bill. That's an extraordinary number, and it's even bipartisan, which I think is also very important. I notice we have among the co-sponsors that are here today, I see Assembly members Otis, Kelles, and Gallagher, and I don't know if I've missed anybody, but they have been staunch advocates of this, and I'm pleased to be working with Senator Kennedy in the state Senate. And I think this is really, it's a complicated bill, but it's really very simple. Climate change is real. It's here. It's hitting hard. And the time to do something about it is yesterday. We cannot wait. We have seen the evidence and the results of climate change just in the past couple of years. July was the hottest month on record worldwide, unprecedented. Places such as Phoenix, Arizona, I think they had 110 plus degrees 3 weeks running. I mean, we've had weather conditions that are totally unprecedented. A hurricane hit a part of Florida that's never been hit before, and hurricanes are more frequent, more intense, as are tornadoes, wildfires, and so on. I don't have to go through all the evidence. We know it's here. And I'm pretty sure that every sane and reasonable person understands that we got to take action. Possibly the only people who didn't seem to understand this were those 8 people on the stage at the debate, the Republican debate last week. But other than that, I think most normal people get it. And there are many things we have to do all at the same time. So this bill is just one piece of it. And we need Governor Hochul to include this in her executive budget. And we want to see the Assembly and the Senate get together to work to make sure this gets done. And it will significantly reduce emissions with the mandates in the bill. And they're not cumbersome mandates. These are very sensible things that need to be done. And because we've assembled such a broad coalition of, as I said, labor, environmentalists, elected officials, and others, I'm hopeful that we can get this done in the coming year. I know the governor wants to do the right thing, so I am urging her, we are urging her, support this, support it now, put it in the budget, let's get it done for next year. The clock is ticking, and it's not going to stop ticking. Thank you all.
Thank you, Assemblymember Dinowitz, and thank you for your leadership on this bill. I'd like to now introduce Assemblymember Steve Otis, a co-sponsor for Green Transit, Green Jobs.
I want to thank everybody on the call, and especially Jeff Dinowitz for his leadership on this bill. We passed the Climate Leadership Act in 2019, and what was that? That was targets, and targets are easy. And in fact, the big message is that targets without implementation really results in nothing. And so this is a bill, a very important bill, an implementation bill to speed the way by which we move to clean buses, clean mass transit, provide funding incentives, because one of the things that Jeff has in the bill is directs our state Department of Transportation to prioritize funding support for the acquisition of the infrastructure and the buses along the way. The other important piece of this bill, and it's been mentioned, is the labor protections. As we transition to clean energy, we don't want to transition away from a labor union workforce. And so it's important that we have those protections and that we make sure that we don't undercut the ability of people to make a fair wage and be in a union job as we transition to clean energy. So thrilled to be here with colleagues in the environmental movement, the labor movement, my colleagues in the Assembly. But again, thanks to Jeff Dinowitz for his leadership. This is a very important bill, but also an easy step to take. We should be doing this and giving the state the role of leading the way and helping these clean bus acquisitions. Very important. Thank you all.
Thank you, Assemblymember Otis. Now I'd like to introduce Assemblymember Emily Gallagher, another co-sponsor.
Thank you so much. I'm really, really excited to be here. 70 co-sponsors proves that legislators know that we need to be planning for the future, and including this bill in the budget will be a testament to the governor's commitment to leading on climate. Just like during World War II, when we faced an imminent threat and deadly threat, we have to make it everyone's job to stop the carbon production. And this bill shows the way forward in doing that. This bill allows us to put really good, attractive union jobs on the table. We're seeing unionizing all over the country in every sector of work. It's about time that we make this sector, the green sector, grow and become the standard for good union jobs. So I'm really, really pleased that we have such momentum in the legislature, and we are ready to stop carbon production in New York State, lead the country, and it's through the bill that my esteemed colleague, Jeffrey Dinowitz, is leading the charge on, and his Senate co-sponsor, Tim Kennedy. It's through that we're going to be able to take this gigantic first step. So I am all in for this bill, and I'm really looking forward to its success. And hopefully the governor will continue to prove to us that she is committed to our climate resiliency here in New York State, and put it in the budget this year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Gallagher. I'd like to now introduce Assemblymember Dr. Anna Kelles.
So wonderful to be here. This is my first presser since session, I think, on Zoom. So very, very exciting to get us back into practice. I want to thank all my colleagues. I want to thank my colleague in particular, Jeff Dinowitz. Thank you so much for carrying this. This is near and dear to my heart. I'm going to actually break into some details, specifically because my community has already made this transition, and I want to show that it is possible. We have a community municipal bus system here. It has 53 buses. They have only purchased electric vehicles since about 2020, and the goal already for them is to be all electric by 2035. And there are already a whole list of funding sources that have been highlighted in this bill, like the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, what people in the business like to call the Low-No Grant, or the Low or No Emissions Vehicle Program, the Diesel Emissions Reductions Act. There's also funding from NYSERDA. And of course, the Vehicle Clean Air Act. We call it the Volkswagen settlement funding. So I want to show how this has actually played into the transition that has happened in my community. In 2008, our TCAT, or the Tompkins County Area Transit, got Volkswagen settlement money, both to contribute to 7 electric buses plus the charging infrastructure. And actually, I'm sorry, that was the VW settlement money plus Low-No grant together. They got 7 electric buses. 4 were from the settlement money and 3 were from the Low-No grants. The 4 that were from the settlement money, the way that the Volkswagen settlement money works is that they pay for part of the amount of purchase of a electric bus so that the cost of buying an electric bus is the same cost as buying a diesel. So of course it is completely justified then to get an electric bus because it would cost the same. The Low-No grant pays for the full amount. So they got 7 buses in 2018. They're getting 6 more large buses from an $8.7 million 2022 Low-No grant. And that grant includes not only the 6 large buses, it also includes 4 smaller buses that will be used for on-demand services for disadvantaged neighborhoods in the county. This money also includes the charging infrastructure. In 2022, we also got $7 million in NYSERDA funding, and that includes also electric bikes, mobile apps, electric SUVs, city sidewalk improvements to support all of this. So my point is that there absolutely is money out there. I would note also in line with this bill, they've retained all their employees. It did require a huge training, and that training is not just for mechanics, it's also for drivers, it's for administrative staff. People are concerned about the range for buses. I would note that Tompkins County is one of the hilliest places in the states. We're sort of known for it, including Buffalo Street. That was the street that the Little Rascals went down in their little red wagon in all those TV shows forever ago. So you just get a sense of how steep that is. But the things that affect range include weather, hills, and the way the drivers operate the buses to capitalize on regenerative braking. So they did all of that training, and once they did all of that training, they have not taken a bus off the road once. So they charge the buses at night, midnight to 7 a.m. When possible. That's the priority, of course, because NYSEG energy costs are higher during the day. They may do some short, small charges, partial charges, and then prioritize the full night charges. They are also using technical support from NYPA to help them set up some of their infrastructure to reduce their operating costs. And they will be working towards, with NYPA, an IT system that they can put in their buses to figure out how to avoid demand charges. And that will also track GHG emissions and total cost reductions that they can put in a dashboard for the public so that the public can see all the savings that we are getting from our bus system. So my whole point of saying all this is to be a case example of how all of this is already possible. There are several bus companies that sell electric, Proterra being all electric, BWD. Gallagher is the biggest bus manufacturer in the country, and they're already getting into electric. So the infrastructure is there, the will is there, the pilot studies are there. I think that my county has proven that this is possible. That it also includes all the support for labor, and that is a huge piece of this bill. I'm very thankful that it's there, and Tompkins County has proven that that part is possible as well. So I won't belabor it anymore. We are ready. We will make this happen. And I am so hopeful that this will end up in the executive budget. Call out to Hochul for putting this in the budget. And again, thank you to all of the advocates that are making this happen and to the sponsors of the bill. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Kelles. I'd like to now introduce Rick Rogers, who is the legislative director for Senator Timothy Kennedy, who is the primary Senate sponsor for the Green Transit, Green Jobs bill.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you everyone who's been on today. I'm on behalf of Senator Tim Kennedy, who unfortunately this week is moving his oldest son into college, so wasn't able to join today. But this issue is so important that we didn't want to delay to have this issue and this call to the governor to have her include this bill in her proposed budget. We know that she's starting the budget process now and has already started it. So now is the time to really take advantage and have the governor come out in support of this bill. You know, in the Senate, Senator Kennedy has 30 co-sponsors, and this bill has passed through the Senate before. So this is something that we continue to push in the Senate. We'll continue to push, and are calling on the governor to do the right thing. A couple years ago, she had a proposal for electric school buses in her budget, which then the Assembly and Senate were able to negotiate around. So this is a push that I think can be done through the budget, and adding the labor standards we know is so important as well. You know, Senator Kennedy wanted me to personally thank his assembly sponsor, Assemblyman Dinowitz, the other assembly members on today as well, Assembly members Otis, Gallagher, and Kelles. You know, we have an assembly member sponsor from Bronx. We have 3 assembly members on, one from Brooklyn, one from Westchester, one from Ithaca, and I am representing Senator Kennedy from out here in Buffalo. So we have a great statewide support for this. It is, as many people have said, the right thing to do, and addressing our CLCPA goals through additional environmental action, plus the necessary labor standards. We have the UAW on. We have a video coming from the CWA member. This is something that helps support well-paying jobs in New York State and make sure as we transition to our environmental green goals, we also make sure that we're supporting the men and women who are working behind it. So I'd like to thank the advocates, Jobs Move America, UAW, New Yorkers for Clean Power, and others. You have Senator Kennedy's full support, as well as the 30 co-sponsors that we have in the Senate Democratic Conference as well. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Rick, and thank you to Senator Kennedy as well for his leadership on this bill. We'd like to bring on some union partners and members of our Electrify New York Coalition. First, I'd like to introduce from my organization, JMA, Farah, Ahmad, our New York senior organizer.
Thank you, Jay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. As New Yorkers face economic uncertainty, with closures threatening the manufacturing sector and its workers, and continued harm caused by the climate crisis, we need new ways of harnessing the power of our public dollars to invest in good jobs and healthy communities. The Green Transit Green Jobs Bill creates conditions to do just that. It would phase out a major source of harmful health impacts on communities and curb planet warming emissions by requiring public bus systems to convert to zero-emission buses. It would also bolster the state's struggling manufacturing sector by providing workers with good family-sustaining jobs throughout this transition. Last week, JMA's 7 union partners representing tens of thousands of New Yorkers signed a letter to the governor encouraging her to include the bill in her executive budget and ensure the state uses its power of public dollars to invest in a fair, climate-safe economy. The manufacturing sector throughout the country and upstate New York once supported solid community-sustaining middle-class jobs. After a peak of 1.6 million manufacturing workers in the mid-70s, New York's thriving industrial belt turned into a rust belt, with less than half that number currently employed in the manufacturing sector. As you hear in the testimonies from labor, climate, and elected supporters today, with this bill, New York can lead the way with the U.S. Jobs Plan, a good jobs and equity policy that will change the way New York State invests our public dollars in order to create the most public good. It can ensure that the state spends our public money on an environmentally just transition. We call on Governor Hochul to include this bill in the executive budget and allocate $100 million each year to non-MTA transit agencies so as to lead the charge towards building a fair economy, one that creates quality jobs and uplifts labor standards in our precarious manufacturing sector. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Farah. I'd like to now invite Anshul Gupta, the Senior Policy Analyst at New Yorkers for Clean Power.
Thank you, Jay, and good morning, all. I will start by thanking our bill sponsors, Senator Kennedy and Assemblymember Dinowitz, for their vision and leadership in introducing the Green Transit Green Jobs Bill, and for their staff's hard work and unwavering advocacy towards getting this bill over the finish line. I'd also like to thank all our climate-friendly co-sponsors here today who have also been trying to push the Assembly to give climate legislation the priority and the urgency that it needs. Today, we have gathered here to call on Governor Hochul to include the Green Transit Green Jobs Bill for weaning New York's transit agencies of polluting diesel fuel starting in 2029 in her next executive budget. Since this bill impacts new procurements, it is really a very gentle but critically important transition with sufficient backstops to ensure that the transition is smooth. Transportation is New York's second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. Medium and heavy duty vehicles comprise only a small fraction of all vehicles on the road, but their emissions and pollution footprint is extremely high due to their weight and the number of miles traveled. Earlier this year, Governor Hochul unveiled her signature Cap and Invest program to fund New York's climate goals and to ensure that her emissions reduction targets are met. But without synergistic regulatory and legislative actions like green transit, green jobs, the Cap and Invest program would need to shoulder the entire responsibility of reducing emissions, which could make it potentially burdensome and also prone to political stress. So we hope that Governor Hochul will include climate bills like green transit, green jobs in her next executive budget to basically complement and support her own Cap and Invest program and to implement and fund the CLCPA. Thank you.
Thank you, Anshul. And I'd like to now introduce one of our wonderful union partners, Brandon Mancilla, who serves as Director for UAW Region 9A.
Hello. Whoops, just had that fall behind me. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing all right. I am Brandon Mancilla, Director of the UAW Region 9A, which represents 35,000 members throughout New England and Puerto Rico, but around 10,000 in New York State, in the New York City and Hudson Valley area. Along with other unions, including my brother Ray Jensen from UAW Region 9 and all the other labor unions represented here today, we are asking Governor Hochul to stand with labor and include green transit, green jobs in the executive budget. We're asking not because we just think this is a great bill and a great step forward, but because our own members' jobs are quite literally on the line. One of the top challenges facing the United Auto Workers, both in New York State and nationwide, is the fight for a just transition for manufacturing workers to a green economy. Right now, we're negotiating with the big three automakers, Ford, Stellantis, and GM, with a deadline of September 14th for contract expiration. We took a successful strike vote just recently. And we're taking these negotiations very seriously, not just to represent our members in terms of wages, benefits, addressing the tier system, et cetera. We also need to secure jobs during the transition from internal combustible engines to electric vehicles. We know this transition is necessary and it is going to happen inevitably, but workers cannot get left behind. We cannot have a green economy that will be just and will be fair without workers and labor having a seat at the table. And that transition cannot come at the expense of good union jobs. New York has the opportunity to lead on fighting for the climate and workers, starting with public transit as well. This bill would ensure that unionized workforces are trained and prepared to build zero-emission buses. New York can use its collective purchasing power to shape this manufacturing sector to promote high-road jobs instead of a race to the bottom, which is what we're seeing in transitions that don't take labor seriously. And the green jobs component would require the usage of a best value contracting framework, a U.S. jobs plan, to incentivize bidders to compete up by earning extra credit for proposals with good wages, benefits, usage of registered apprenticeship programs, as well as job creation for underrepresented individuals and those laid off as a result of the transition away from fossil fuels. Public transit is just the beginning. When we show that green transit creates good jobs, we can also show that the whole state can transition to other green sectors, offshore wind projects, semiconductor facilities, the electrification of mass transit, period, while also creating good community sustaining jobs. And I think this is an important transition discussion that we're having, because this is also about social justice for all of our communities. The working class is a diverse, multiracial class, and it's a class that deserves justice and equity, and this is our opportunity to seize that moment. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Brandon. I'd like to now introduce Kevin Garcia, Transportation Planner with the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance.
Thanks, Jay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Garcia, and I am the Transportation Planner with the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance. NEJA is a nonprofit citywide membership network linking grassroots organizations from low-income communities of color in their struggle for environmental justice. And we're also a part of the Electrify New York Coalition. We're happy to join our elected leaders, labor allies, and coalition partners in calling on Governor Hochul to include the Green Transit, Green Jobs bill in next year's budget. We know that the transportation sector is the largest contributor, the second largest contributor to emissions in New York State. So zero emission transit buses will be critical to achieving the targets set by the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. The current fleet of buses operating today, spew toxic fumes into the air and lead to air pollution in communities along the bus routes and at bus depots. This air pollution leads to cardiovascular and respiratory health issues for riders and families that live along the routes, but also for the workers who ensure that our buses are running. At its core, this bill is a resounding call to action, pushing us beyond the confines of outdated transportation norms. This bill recognizes the interconnectedness of green transit and green jobs, and by emphasizing the purchase of zero-emission buses and prioritizing the procurement of electric-powered vehicles and infrastructure, New York can take the deliberate steps towards reducing emissions, improving air quality, and revitalizing communities that have disproportionately borne the brunt of environmental hazards. As it was said earlier, climate change is real, and we cannot wait any longer for policies like green transit, green jobs to go into effect. So we look forward to Governor Hochul to include this in her executive budget next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I'd like to now introduce Ray Jensen Jr., who serves as Assistant Director for UAW Region 9. Thank you, Ray.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here. Thank you, my UAW brother, Brandon Mancilla, for also being here. My name is Raymond Jensen, and I'm UAW Region 9 Assistant Director. We represent Western Central New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, with about 50,000 active and retired members. And I am also a member of Local 774, UAW 774. I'm here today to voice my support for the Green Transit, Green Jobs bill. I'm pushing for this bill to be included in the governor's executive budget, as it will help address two of our most urgent public problems using public dollars: climate change and unemployment. As a New York State resident, the climate portion of the bill is very important to me. With climate change impacting our environment and our health negatively, I worry about my well-being as well as the health and well-being of my loved ones, neighbors, and coworkers. As a worker in New York, the jobs portion of this bill is very important to me. We have witnessed rapidly changing technology causing unemployment. The Green Jobs bill will not only protect that, but could also encourage good middle-class family-supporting jobs in New York with training and employment opportunities for people who are often left out of our new opportunities. As a UAW member, I am concerned about our brothers and sisters in transitioning to this new economy, not being left behind. We must offer training to the workforce in New York State. Our workforce takes pride in leading the way of elevating New York State into a new green future that's fair and equitable for all. Inclusion of Green Transit, Green Jobs bill and the governor's executive budget can ensure New York State transitions to a green economy while maintaining and creating community-sustaining jobs. Let's change the way New York State purchases and contracts high-dollar value items, starting with public transit. New York State can transition to the green economy with offshore wind projects, semiconductor facilities, electric school buses, etc., while creating good community-sustaining jobs with its purchases. Thank you for your time and attention on this important matter.
Thanks so much, Ray. I'd like to now call and introduce another wonderful member of our Electrify New York Coalition, Monique Fitzgerald, the climate justice organizer with the Long Island Progressive Coalition.
Thank you, Jay, and all the speakers that went before me, as well as the attendees. So again, my name is Monique Fitzgerald. I use pronouns she and her. I am the climate justice organizer at the Long Island Progressive Coalition, a organization that was established in 1979 and is a part of the Electrify New York Coalition. I am here on occupied Siwahonki land of Shells, otherwise known as Long Island, and I am situated specifically on the unceded land of the Uncochuk Nation, which is now known as Patchogue. The Uncochuk Nation is a very vibrant nation with many tribal members that are still living here on a reserve and part of their ancestral land. We at Long Island Progressive Coalition support Green Transit, Green Jobs, as it is a pathway to a just transition for public transit workers to go from working in unsafe conditions, forced to breathe air from diesel-powered buses, to a working environment with cleaner air. On Long Island, we have a scarce public transit system that we struggle to strengthen and make more accessible by calling for more service lines and longer service hours. As we do this, we need to make sure that we are also ensuring that our workers have a safe place to work and a wage that supports the cost of living on Long Island. Therefore, we support green transit, green jobs, as this bill ensures the labor commitments are transparent and accessible for the public, as this bill will serve as a foundation for livable wages. We also see green transit, green jobs as a public health bill. Diesel-powered buses produce harmful particulate emissions linked to asthma and other respiratory diseases. On segregated Long Island, that means that people who live in places like Wyandanch, North Belport, and Brentwood, with the highest ER visits for asthma in Suffolk County, will continue to see these ER visits rise, and we will continue to overburden our healthcare system if we fail to act. These communities are just 3 of the 85 disadvantaged communities on Long Island that must have a public transit system that will eliminate further harm to our health as a matter of justice, equity, and reversing historical oppression. We must rapidly end this dependence on fossil fuels and deliver a public transit system that prioritizes our disadvantaged communities on Long Island and across the state. Governor Hochul include green transit, green jobs to this budget session, as this bill is the pathway for our disadvantaged communities and our public transit workers. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Monique. And finally, for our speakers, I'd like to introduce George Kerr III, a IUE CWA member in Jamestown, New York. George couldn't be here today, but recorded a short statement of support.
Hi, my name is George Kerr, and I'm an electric assembler at the newly unionized New Flyer facility in Jamestown, New York, where we build public transit buses. New Flyer workers like me want to see Governor Hochul include green transit, green jobs in our executive budget because we know the difference legislation like this can make in the lives of working class New Yorkers. We were excited to see the inclusion of the U.S. Jobs Plan in the legislation because it incentivizes bidders to compete up and allows high road employers such as New Flyer to stay competitive. As a new IUE CWA member, I'm proud to be here today on behalf of New Flyer Workers United in support of this bill and alongside my brothers and sisters at the UAW, IBEW, SMART, and SEIU. We encourage Governor Hochul to include green transit, green jobs in our executive budget and help usher in our state into a green economy. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thank you all for joining us to kick off Labor Day weekend with the Green Transit, Green Jobs Bill and a request for Governor Hochul to include in the executive budget. That concludes our speakers, and I'd like to open it up for any questions from the press.
It looks like we have a few questions through the QA function. We have how many jobs are expected to be created by this bill?
Great, thank you. Let me just pull up the Q&As. We're pulling, I think Farah is pulling some of the job number estimates for this. I do see also, we'll get that in just a second. And who is opposing the bill and why? I think maybe one of the Electrify New York members wants to speak to this too, but I think that anytime there's a transition, we want to make sure we're doing our due diligence and making sure we have the right language, right bill. I think that less opposition and more, making sure that we're doing this transition correctly. So thinking about the environmental implications, but also the jobs and training and community aspects of it. But if any other Electrify members would like to.
I'm happy to jump in. Jay, I think you hit the nail on the head. One of the concerns that tends to be raised with this bill is whether there's going to be enough zero emission buses on the market in order to meet this timeline, right, of beginning to purchase zero emission buses starting January 1st, 2029. Will there be enough funding? Is it realistic? Is it achievable? But as we heard earlier, there are already some transit agencies that are making, that transition, that are only purchasing zero emission buses. And, it is achievable. And once we set this timeline, we can start working towards that. And there's also a lot included in the bill that will help to make sure that transit agencies have the resources and have a plan in order to purchase the new zero emission buses, but also begin to retire their diesel operated buses.
May I jump in for a little bit to add to this? I just wanted to note another thing that I hear that does make me quite frustrated, that we're still talking about whether or not we can efficiently drive fleets of electric buses in cold weather. I did want to note, if I haven't said it before, Tompkins County is in one of the coldest bands of like cold areas of New York State, and we have zero problem with that, plus the really steep hills combined. I would also note that Quebec in Canada also has this requirement, and they have not had any problems either driving their buses through Quebec in Canada. So for anyone who has any opposition because they're throwing out the concern of cold weather, it's ludicrous, and I think we're way past that at this point. So that's one. And as far as the procurement, as long as we have foresight, we should not have a problem. At one point during COVID, it took up to 18 months to get a bus that was ordered. So there is that, but that was during COVID, the tail end of COVID. That is coming down. And of course, these are municipal bus systems and authorities. Their budgets, they are always purchasing buses way out anyway. So for our bus system, this was not a problem at all. They already planned for that. And so they were able to transition, as I said, almost 25% of their existing fleet by the end of this next round of buses that they will be getting. So so again, those two issues, I think, are false concerns.
Thank you, Assemblymember. And going back to the question about how many jobs are expected to be created by this bill, based on our initial estimates, if the MTA transitioned all 5,700 plus its buses to zero emission, it has a potential to create over 6,100 direct jobs and 21,500 indirect jobs in the US bus manufacturing sector, based on our initial estimates. I see another question. Are the transit workers unions supporting the bill? We are in constant communication with our partners, ATU and TWU. I know TWU has quite a bit going on right now too, with the Metro North. We know that they were helped shape the initial bill from a few years ago. We're still in conversation on what this looks like for our other labor partners, but we're in conversation. And I see one from Stephen Lee. What kinds of responses have you gotten from Governor Hochul? And has her office made any commitments, even if only informally? I can just speak from our letter. We haven't directly received a response to our labor letter yet. That was just sent last Friday. But if any other electrified members would like to jump in.
I'm happy to jump in. Yeah, so we've had a conversation with the governor's office, and we plan to continue communicating with her office about this bill and the urgency in order to make sure that this is in the executive budget and that we get this bill over the finish line. We know that while air pollution affects us all, low-income communities and communities of color who are more likely to be located near ports, rail yards, warehouses, busy roads, bus depots, they suffer disproportionately from the consequences of dirty air. We have these set timelines and goals by the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And it builds on the work that she's already done, particularly thinking back 2 budgets ago where she included in her budget the electric school bus mandate. So this is just building on, yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. And I see one, are the various regional transit authorities supporting or opposing the bill? I think this goes back to the previous answer to the question on opposition. It's not so much that there's a strong opposition, but there are concerns about how this is going to play out and make sure that the regional transit authorities have the adequate funding to make this step from day one. I think that that's what our proposal to Governor Hochul to include money in the budget for these other transit agencies, transit authorities is so critical to make sure that they can kind of share in this effort, and it's not just limited to the MTA. And I don't see any other questions. Are there any other questions from the press or others? So I don't see any other questions. And just going back to the question about the transit unions too, the workforce development report addresses the concerns of TW and ATU around possible job loss for fewer mechanics potentially as a result of transition. So those are things that we've tried to mitigate too in this language. And I think that's all we have, if there's no other questions. Well, thank you all, and have a very happy Labor Day weekend. And we look forward to continuing our progress on this bill and in advocating for Governor Hochul to adopt this within the 2024-25 executive budget. Thank you all.